okay, hey, how are Lakers going to improve their roster? What's Rob Pelinka going to do with those draft picks? What players stay? What players go? Is there a scenario that you think between now and the trade deadline that the Lakers don't make any moves? Is there a scenario where they hold on to the picks? And the reason why I'm asking the question, Cope, because I think there can't be a scenario that exists. But hypothetically, they're going to come back. The schedule is not getting any easier. And it's been really awkward, and we'll get into LeBron in a little bit, but man, there's been a lot of chatter about LeBron. Hey, is he? And I'm talking about on all the main networks. Can the Warriors try to make a run for him? If there was something Kendrick Perkins said earlier that I'll get to about the Lakers, they would listen if LeBron wanted out of LA. Put all that to the side for a quick second. Is there a scenario that Rob Pelinka is not using those picks to try to improve that roster? Do you believe something like that exists, knowing that he didn't do it last trade deadline, he didn't do it in the summer, and clearly his team needs some help?
Yeah, I think there are actually, to me, a couple scenarios that if they occurred, that this roster would more or less stay the same. I mean, maybe like a minor tweak or two if they want to open up a roster spot or get even lower below the second apron, without necessarily looking to improve the actual current team. So I guess I'll try to like do it succinctly, and if you want to get like into details about it, I think one scenario is if they just didn't show improvement. Like if they go into January, February looking like
What's the
a,
record got to be? Below 500 or 500?
I mean, maybe below 500, more, but below, if they're below 500 or just like hovering around 500, if they just show, even outside the record, if they just show that they're a more pedestrian team, like the first 12 to 14 games, they were more an aberration rather than the last however many 12 games or 10 games. If they show themselves to be more of a playing contender rather than an actual NBA contender, I could definitely see this front office saying, why invest more in this group because they haven't shown enough. I mean, what we're approaching, I think it was preseason or one of the preseason availabilities. Rob Pelinka said 30 games. They want to have 30 games to really
Mm.
show, before show to allow this group to show itself what it can be. Well, we're creeping up on what's it going to be? Game 25. They're 13 and 11, so this would be game 25 on Friday. Six more. I mean, if my math serves me correct, I think that's six more games until like that quote unquote 30 game threshold. So if they go into the 30 game threshold feeling like unsure about the group, and just not feeling like this is a group that's really truly going to contend, then I could see them reasoning with themselves. Maybe this group's not worth further investing in the sense of trading draft picks, because is
Well, Coach,
also
can I play one scenario? So let's just say, because
yeah.
they got tough games coming up. You're at Minnesota. You got the game on Memphis against Memphis. Memphis looking like one of the best teams in the West. No real surprise there now that they're getting healthy.
Yeah.
Two against Sacramento on the road. Detroit, Golden State, that gets you to Christmas. So now
Yeah.
you're right around that 30 game range. By the
Yeah.
way,
It's 30.
right after that, Sacramento and Cleveland at home too. So we know what Sacramento and Cleveland. Sacramento's always been a problem for the Lakers, and Cleveland is clearly a really good team.
Hmm?
Does anything come into play of LeBron was talking about it? Well, we're missing a lot of role players. We're missing Austin Reeves and Vando, who a lot of people in the chat are asking for a Vando update. And I don't, unless you have something, it sounds like it's just status quo. Do you think that do you think he takes that into consideration too when you get past 30 games of, well, what guys did I have and what guys did I not have? How much do you think that comes into play?
Yeah, well, for the Vando, I hope people saw this. I think they did. But I mean, I think the Lakers put it publicly that they're expecting him to come back in early January. That's the latest update we got. I think that was last week. It was
About a
right
week
before the
ago.
yeah,
Yeah,
about a week
about a
ago,
week ago.
right before the Miami game. So that's the latest update. Obviously, there'll be more updates, possibly even as today once they
Sure.
practice, or once they have more practices. But um, yeah, I mean that's the latest update on him. As of for your question, yeah, I mean you have to factor all that in. You have to factor in that Christian Wood and Jared Vanderbilt have played zero of these 24 games, and I mean going into Christmas, which is game 30, By that point, it will likely still be 0 out of 30 games. So factor that in. Factor in the fact that Austin Reeves, during one of the toughest stretches of the season, Austin Reeves missed 5 of those games, or at least 5 of those games. Factor in that Anthony Davis has been dealing with the foot issue for most of the season. That LeBron he's also had his own his own individual shooting drought, scoring issues during that. So you have to take all these factors in. End of the day, if Rob believes that this group or sees it as like, yes, I could upgrade with depending on how you view, if you view this as an upgrade, Jonas Valanciunas, or go on down the line of another backup big or wing or whoever it may be, you can go down the list of guys that I'm sure Lakers fans have no problem saying that they want that guy. But if the price is, all right, give us 2 first-round picks, and you're looking at it as like, well, is this player even worth in the first place? And how much does this player impact winning in terms of impacting the group? Then, yeah, you factor all that in, but it could also be one of those scenarios where we saw last year, or last February rather, this past February, where they just didn't feel like it was worth it in terms of what you would give up to improve the group. There wasn't enough out there.
Kobe, the pressure that Pelinka is going to have on his back if he goes another imagine if the season ended this year. And listen, I'm not telling you it's the right thing or the wrong thing, but the pressure on Rob Pelinka, can you imagine if we get past the trade deadline, D'Lo is still on the team. It's still the exact same roster. You held on to your 2 first rounders. You might as well then just started a rebuild 2 years ago. And I think, and I know that's okay. That's not exactly accurate because they made it to the Western Conference Finals. I mean, it would be idiotic to not give them an opportunity last year to do what they were doing. But I find it so tough to comprehend the amount of scrutiny Pelinka is going to get if they do nothing. But I know there are scenarios out there, like you're saying, if Rob Pelinka my job is not to appease Laker fans. My job is to do what's in the best interest of the team. It's going to be interesting to play out because there, obviously a lot of Laker fans that there's going to be pressure from them. But if the team is not showing you that we're a player or 2 away, then you could potentially be wasting picks unless you're making a trade knowing that I'm going to have whoever comes in, I'm going to have for 3 years, or this is a player that I want to have on the Lakers franchise for years to come.
Can I give you another scenario?
Sure.
Which I feel like we ran into a similar scenario because I had it on my mind, but it came back to mind when you brought up D'Lo. What if certain players just get hot? Like we kind of saw this with D'Lo before the last year's trade deadline. What if, let's go there then. What if D'Lo finds his shooting rhythm and you feel like this player is more useful on our roster rather than trading him away for a player that, in February we have to integrate them into the system and we don't, the fit may be good, or again, it's all dependent on the player who you're talking about. But
if I use D'Lo as the example, I think for me, I've seen enough from the player. And even if he all of a sudden starts balling out, I think most Laker fans are going to say trade him now, right? Like, oh, hey, his stock's not going to be any higher. It's I don't think anything's going to change from my opinion on that. And I think that's kind of the same for Rui. That's the same for a few of those players. Gabe Vincent, if all of a sudden Gabe Vincent started, playing good basketball, do I feel like that's going to be, can I rely on that all the way through? I'm not sure, but I don't think there's anything that these players can do for me. I've seen enough of them to really kind of change my opinion on them.
Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that you have to factor in. Excuse me. Is the play, like, is it a hot streak? Is it something that's reliable? And those are all, because we kind of saw that with certain players last year. Like if you brought D'Lo up, like he, like January, February, March, like he was killing it, and then he was balling, and then once you get to the playoffs, there was a dip. Noticeable dip. Excuse me, I'm like,
no, but I laugh because every time D'Lo has a good game, people will say in the chat, he had a good, what do you have against Portland? 28 and 14, right? 28 points and 14 assists.
Incredible performance.
And all my comments were like, well, of course they played Portland and the game didn't matter.
You
That dude
can't
can't find that. And
beat
to be
him.
honest
Can't
with you,
win either way.
you can't win either way. And there's a lot of times I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'm arguing with them. I don't think I'm arguing with them.
Look, all these games. Look, okay. In his defense, all these games matter. All these games matter.
That's funny.
All these. It is funny though, but no, I think that's these. There are other scenarios, but those are like the two. I guess going to call them more extreme scenarios on one end. If the team just shows that they're more pedestrian than not, and there's not a player that's you think, oh yeah, this player on their own is going to turn around. I mean, we saw what you saw 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago, was like, oh, widespread changes bringing in D'Angelo Russell, Jared Vanderbilt, Rui Hachimura. Like there were some
Right.
widespread, like obviously LeBron, Anthony Davis, Austin Reeves. Those were the guys that that was the core that stuck around. But those were widespread changes, and it's hard to see them making similar widespread changes this season, especially because it feels like they have even less financial flexibility, especially now they're just talking about these aprons and
Right.
staying under the second apron and the penalties when you go over the second one, and then being hard capped. I mean, it's the machinations are just a little bit more tricky than they were even 2 years ago. So there are scenarios. I mean, there are very real scenarios. Like I said, if they show so little that it's like, why even use a first round pick to get insert role player, because said role player is not going to be enough of a difference maker to make this group go from a playing contender to an actual NBA championship contender. Or hey, Gabe Vincent found a rhythm. Rui Hachimura is very important for our team. D'Angelo Russell's shooting better. Whatever, like player by player. Jackson Hayes is more consistent. Like then they convince themselves this player is more valuable on our roster than as a trade piece to do X or do Y. So these are the scenarios, and we
Sure.
just saw them. We saw them last year. We saw them this summer too.